we want to move on to the next part of our program now, which we've spent a lot of time talking about what we do for the youth and what our organization is now. And we've referenced the wonderful people who made this possible, and that's Chris Gonzalez and Jeff Werner. Many of our staff never had the opportunity to know them. As I said earlier, a lot of our staff is much younger than this organization, so we didn't have the opportunity to meet these wonderful people, but we do have one staff member who had the honor to know them both as mentors and as friends. So I would like to invite our Director of Human Resources, Randa Stefano.
Yes, I want to first of all thank Zoe and the committee for such a wonderful job putting on this event, and I want to thank all of our wonderful staff for all the work you do all the time, so thank you, thank you. Now, as Zoe said, some of us were not around then, but at least a few of us were, that are in this audience, I mean. So I want to recognize the other people that were here in the early years. If you were here in the early years, raise your hand. So we've got a handful of people. So thanks for being here. And, you know, the alumni are spread out all over literally the world, so not everybody can be here tonight. But since being asked to talk about Chris and Jeff and try to tell you a little bit about what they were like, I've thought a lot about it. And, you know, as Zoe said, it was an honor to have known them, and I really feel like it was a blessing as well. So, you know, besides being the couple that with Pat Jordan's help 35 years ago created IYG, or founded it, I met them because I saw a posting. You know, this was the late 80s, and obviously things were a lot different. AIDS was unfortunately rampant, and there was just a lot of things that were going on, and people didn't have places to go, especially those under 21. So I saw a posting for a get-together at a gay-friendly storefront at 38th, actually church front, 38th and Illinois area, and it was for a dance, a gay dance. So I didn't exactly know what that was, but I knew what a dance was. So, you know, I went to that, and later I found out that was the start of IYG. It's on our timeline that we have. It was the night that the DJ speakers blew, and there were literally like 3 or 4 youth show up. I happened to be one of them. And this is when I was in college at IUPUI. And so that was my first experience with IYG, but I didn't honestly know it. And somebody told me, by the way, that IYG, in the spirit of being confidential, was being called Gay Youth Metro at the time. I'm not sure exactly when, but that stood for gym, the word gym, so they could say, I'm going to the gym. So anyway, I learned that recently. So I went there, and then I didn't know that IYG started having meetings at Chris and Jeff's house in '88, but they did. And later, you know, I had at that point met one other gay guy, and through a mutual friend of mine from high school, and that was really the only gay person I actually knew. So I saw a posting in the newspaper for a gay roller skating party this time. Well, again, I'm like, I gotta find out what happens at a gay roller skating party. So, of course, I went, invited that one other guy I knew, and we went, and the first people when we walked in the door that we met at that table selling tickets, which of course benefit IYG, was Chris and Jeff. And, you know, Chris was warm and welcoming and very talkative compared to Jeff, who was much quieter. You know, they were there to tell people, not just sell tickets, but tell people about IYG and invite us to come to the meetings. Well, you didn't have to ask me twice. So, of course, after having a great night at the skating party, which was fun, and I hadn't been on skates in years, let me tell you. So, but anyway, I got into it very quickly. We did go to that meeting. And we got to suddenly be in a room at the skating party and at the meeting with a lot of other gay people. And it really did open up a world of new opportunities for us and made us realize we weren't alone. Because sometimes, believe me, back then you felt alone. Also, Chris was a natural leader, it seemed to me. He just always seemed to be there leading the charge, so to speak, for something. Also, Jeff was there supporting and helping any way he needed to, and of course later he stepped up and became our second executive director. When we went to the meeting, I enjoyed it, and those were usually educational meetings, but we also had fun. But I stayed at IYG the next 3 or so years, so this was not a short thing. I met a lot of great friends there. I had a lot of great times. And this is something that impacted me and those people for years and has really changed our lives. I also want to acknowledge Lisa Gonzalez Moore, who's here with us tonight at this front table. This is Chris's sister. So Lisa, thank you for being here. And we will be, after I'm finished, we'll be reading a letter that Lisa wrote for us. Some of the other ways that my life was enriched was attending 3 proms through IYG. I never attended one in high school, but 3 proms through IYG. Also going to several LGBTQ-related health conferences in different parts of the country, including my first trip to Washington, D.C., and the first time I ever flew when we went to New Orleans. So those were always interesting. I would also add, and Zoe mentioned this earlier, that the AIDS education we got and safe sex education was vital, especially back then. And the other part that I want to mention is at some point when we were at IYG, we started talent shows, which yes, were mostly drag, but there was some other talent. And so, giving people the ability to get up on a stage, even if it wasn't really a stage, and express themselves for the first time is really important to a lot of people. And for some people, it was also about expressing their true gender for the first time, in public especially. Chris was determined, he was caring, and I still have videos of him interacting with youth, fighting for IYG, speaking at conferences, just usually little snippets, but it's good to see him in action. And I have that one that's on the history video where him and Jeff were dancing at one of the early proms. So that's beautiful to be able to see that. Another example is one time I turned on the news and there was Chris on the news leading a march down Mass Ave. I think it was the first sort of march we had in the city. We had pride picnics before that. So, lots of ways that Chris was a leader. And also, for those who don't know, Chris and Jeff met at Franklin College when they were both going there, and fell in love. And my understanding, and I have an article that where Jeff is interviewed, and he was talking about, I believe he was not out yet before he met Chris. So I think that that did help a lot for him to become more comfortable as well. As I said, later Jeff stepped up and became our second executive director when Chris was sadly gone too soon. And I don't know that Jeff got over that loss. He lived another almost 3 years and focused on leading IYG, and that was really stepping outside his comfort zone to become that leader when you're used to being the wind beneath someone's wings. And I think that's what Jeff was like. And also, Jeff was a numbers person. He worked with taxes and maybe accounting, I'm not exactly sure. But, so it's not that he wasn't good with people, because he was, but being so quiet, he just wasn't used to being the one at the front, I don't believe. But both of them were people I was so blessed to know, and as I said, their work changed so many lives, including mine. And I asked some others that weren't able to be here tonight, a couple people, how they would describe Chris and Jeff, and here's just a couple of things they said. So Tricia Pullman, who with her now wife Renee, was a facilitator and board member back in the early days, and also she was the vice president of the board at the time, said they had endless energy, and eventually I gave up trying to keep up with them. They accomplished so much, and Chris was determined to have as full a life as possible and get as much done in the life that he had. As we said, unfortunately it was way too short, and I do wish they were here with us tonight. I wish they could see, but I think somehow they know, that we're still going strong, and that this is, they're the reason, honestly, we're all here. They're the ones who got this started, and we are grateful to continue that work. Also, another person, Jody, who was involved in the early years, shared that Chris was a forgiving leader and an optimist. Now, what did she mean by forgiving leader? Here's the example she gave. He knew people didn't always know it all. And he knew that sometimes people's background could cause them to have misconceptions about others. And so he would work with people and help them educate themselves so that they became better people than when they walked in the door in tons of ways. So I know that Chris and Jeff would be so proud of how far IYG has come and what we've accomplished in these 35 years. As I said, I only wish they could see it all and physically be here with us. Even just same-sex marriage. I mean, Jody told me that Chris told her, whenever this was, that he thought same-sex marriage would be legal in 10 years. Well, he wasn't that far off, but I would have loved him to see that and for them to be able to get married. You know, I would say this: may we never forget Chris and Jeff and all those who made this possible for us to be here today. And I want to thank them for what they did. And let's keep all this going for at least another 35 years. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for supporting IYG.